we looked at data that tried to answer the question, is it better to be skinny but unfit, or is it better to be a little bit chubby, so to say, but in decent fitness shape, so to say? And the data suggests that it's actually better to be a bit fitter, but also a bit fatter, than to be skinny but unfit. So I think that's also another important takeaway maybe for the audience, that don't worry about certain details too much. And like you said, maybe it catches on later and you're still able to optimize these things once you reach the next level.
Welcome to the Best Hour of Your Day podcast. This is your host, Felix. And in this podcast, I am interviewing CrossFitters and experts from around the world.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you too.
How are you?
Good. We just gave a talk here. First time that I came into the coach congress. I heard about it. Our box owner said, hey, you should come. And then I got an invitation with WOD Science to speak. So I said, okay, let's go there.
Yeah, it's actually the first time for me as well. So okay. I'm really impressed by the amount of people who are here.
Yeah, I agree. I think we were just saying this prior to our presentation, that this is one of the larger audiences we presented in front of. So
physically, sure.
Definitely more than during my PhD thesis. So yeah, that was cool. That was a really nice experience.
So WOD Science? I mean, probably the name is familiar to a lot of CrossFitters, especially my audience. They are mainly CrossFitters and they're like browsing social media. And I mean, I think everyone in the realm of CrossFit has probably heard of you and what you're doing, but
thank you.
For the people who don't know what you're doing, maybe you can like give us a 2-minute elevator pitch.
Yeah, happy to do that. So we both are researchers, and we did sports science studies ourselves. But yeah, then we post those studies, or we publish those studies in large academic journals, and then we found that actually not many people read this, and it's a bit of a shame, certainly in more applied sciences like sports sciences, that the coaches, the ones that you actually do the sports studies for, don't get to read it. So I contacted Henning like 5 years ago, and I said, man, we should do something and just explain this sometimes difficult language and difficult papers to the lay public. Let's see what's happened. It's kind of our passion. Let's see what happens. And then, yeah, we had certainly on Instagram really large organic growth. And our goal still remains the same. Being independent research, independent academics, try to explain research to the general public that can actually use this and explain this to their athletes. That's basically the main goal.
How did you find CrossFit?
Oh, wow, that's a cool question. So I think I heard of CrossFit pretty much around the time where it was first becoming popular, so around 2008, 9 in that area.
That's early.
We saw YouTube videos of a couple of people doing pull-ups with additional weight and stuff like that, and then combined it with running. So some way to do resistance exercise in a setting of high intensity training, where the metabolic conditioning was at the forefront rather than just the lifting weight. And that's something that I started with a buddy of mine back in the day. And then soon after, it caught on in Germany in general, I would say. And I think since 2012, together with a friend of mine from high school and Hauptstadt CrossFit here in Berlin, actually, I started doing it a little more deliberately and focused a little more on it.
What about you?
Yeah, so I have been playing a complete different sports when I grew up. I played golf at a relatively high level national team and so on, almost went to college. It was always quite good in the gym with my buddies at lifting heavy weights. And of course, golf is nice, but it's of course quite repetitive, always the same. At least from a movement standard. So a buddy of mine, same, said, hey man, you should once try CrossFit really early as well in Belgium, one of the first gyms, CrossFit Leuven. Yeah, same, I liked it immediately because also from an exercise science point of view, I liked it. I was like, okay, you do strength and you do endurance in this, not even in the same session, but in the same workout. This was unseen. We never learned this in school or at university. We all did this separately. So what happens if you do this? What kind of athlete do you breed? This was always my interest. And it's also, I still think, a very efficient way to train and to keep yourself healthy. So that's why I stuck to it and still interested still in the physiology of it, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think one of the cool things about CrossFit is the claim that what can't be measured can't be improved. And I think in science, it's all about like data and measuring something. So was that one of the points why I saw this combination between the science and the CrossFit or the workout thing?
Yeah, I think I really liked from the start that CrossFit is trying to quantify fitness. And you can still argue about the efficiency and whether that is done really comprehensively up to today, or is the person who's crowned the fittest on earth truly the fittest person, and what do you consider fitness? But I do like the idea that you try and quantify it, and I think that is something that CrossFit has brought to the table that wasn't really existing in the sports world previously, to give an outlet to people who want to be fitter and not just, so to say, better runners or better cyclists or better weightlifters or something, but putting it together and then still trying to find a platform for it. So that is awesome. That's just fun. For somebody who has a background in more like the powerlifting realm, where maybe not like golf, but it's still the same three type of movements that you do, and they still come in handy during CrossFit, not gonna lie, but it becomes repetitive pretty quickly. And the fact that in CrossFit you have all those different domains where you do gymnastics and pure endurance, so to say, when it's a pure, you have a rowing half marathon or a marathon or something like that at the games. I think that is really intriguing from a sports scientist's point of view. Yeah.
Exactly.
What were like the biggest scientific facts or things that you found out during the last 3 or 5 years? Are there any things that stuck in your head where you thought like, oh shit, I didn't expect that?
Yeah, so it's interesting, very interesting question, because we came with a very, let's say, prepared mind to, at least myself, to CrossFit. I was doing my master's degree at the university, following the structure, and back in the day, certainly CrossFit was very rogue and did stuff different than the mainstream sport or fitness industry. And the immediate thing I found very strange, and I still didn't really understand, was the major focus on low carbohydrate diets and low carbs. Carbs are the enemy. Get out of the couch. Get out of the carbs. And I was. It's interesting, and maybe for the general population, it could be a good slogan. You certainly don't have to eat too much sugar or carbs if you're sedentary. But many people were working out hard in my gym at the time, and they were following certain diets at like 10% carbohydrates. And certainly coming from a university standpoint, I was like, why are they doing this? This is actually hampering their performance. There's no reason to do this. So this was one of the major things we also put out on the the page, is to try to explain evidence-based information. If you do 5 workouts a week and you do whatever, a certain amount of training, you will need the fuel, and the carbohydrates won't cause any chronic disease and so on. It's important I think to explain to people. But on the other hand, of course, if you're a weekend warrior and you do 1 time or 2 times a week a workout, you don't have to, of course, care too much about your timing of carbohydrate intake. I would say that's one of the things that I always stuck to me with CrossFit, and it also taught me a lot, I think.
Yeah. One thing that I found intriguing is, and that has become more and more prominent over the years, is that coming from an academical background, where you call the combination of strength training and endurance training concurrent training, the prevailing idea was at the time that you couldn't really combine those two very well. Like, you would really seriously hamper your endurance progress or your strength progress if you did both simultaneously, let alone in the same session or so. And seeing that this is, of course, on the upper end, that is still the case. Even though we have athletes who do compete in weightlifting and in CrossFit, at the highest level of cycling or running or weightlifting, you still see
Certainly strength, I would say.
You see more performance and higher performances than you do in the CrossFit realm. So between the professional athletes, there is still some discrepancy, but I would still say that it is a lot better or a lot easier to combine it, and you can reach a far higher level than was previously anticipated. So you might not become an Olympic athlete while you do CrossFit, but you can still build tremendous strength and you can still build tremendous endurance simultaneously. And I think that is against previous dogma, and that's something that I found really interesting to see over the years and experience myself. To be honest, I didn't think that I would be able to, maintain as much strength from my powerlifting days while I still do metcons or pure aerobic work pretty frequently. So that's exciting, I think.
May I chip in here, because it's a very interesting physiological concept, because we just did a study actually on this together with the University of Basel and WOD Science, where we tested 60 elite athletes, like elite top 5% of the open, and most of them were semifinals, quarterfinals. So good cohort of people. And there, if we tested them in the lab for basic strength tests like leg press, all kind of extension tests, as well as pure endurance on the bike, maximal exhaustion test, step test. These things are always done in physiology experiments. And we wanted to see how far they're actually from, let's say, top athletes in their sport. For example, one test you always do in sports science studies is how high you can jump, counter movement jump. And these counter movement jumps are standardized between different studies. So also weightlifters have done that. And there you can see that CrossFit athletes, the top of the world, actually are very close to the same strength and explosive power as elite weightlifters. But if you look at the other side, pure endurance, meaning threshold power, maximal wattage they can push on the bike, they're far under the elite cyclists, for example, or elite langlaufers, cross-country skiers, like 30% less. So I do think there is, at the far end, a concurrent effect. I'm quite sure about that. And in CrossFit specifically, maybe in High Rocks, it's by the way something else.
Yeah.
In CrossFit, it will be more on the endurance based, because they have so much muscle. They have like 10 kilograms, 15 kilograms more muscle than a usual endurance athlete. And but the strength is, there is a concurrent probably effect, but it's quite low. It's 5%, 2%. That's, I think, just this data is now tickling in, and we start to understand this better now.
I agree. I think that's something that we see, that there is definitely a strength bias in CrossFit compared to endurance. And that's also something that we have commented on in the past with our page, but that is also something that is done by design, because I know that CrossFit has always said that intensity is something that they're really focused on, and they want to see the sport predominantly in this high intensity interval training style modality and domain. So it's no surprise to the people who have been doing CrossFit for a while, but it's still cool to see how it shook out as the sport progressed over the years and decades, and how it grew, and that it still maintained this, I'd say, strength focus over a pure aerobic endurance focus.
If you can't snatch 285 as a male, you don't get in the semis.
Yeah, true. There's interesting correlations in that direction, for sure.
Can you do that? I can't do that.
250? No, I think my PR was maybe around that neighborhood, but not right now. No, I'm not there.
Maybe with enough carbs.
maybe with enough carbs.
Maybe enough training. You
that
need
is
the training.
interesting. Yeah, that's the main conundrum, I would say, in CrossFit in general. I mean, eating yourself up to get heavier and stronger. I mean, that's something that power lifters and weightlifters and bodybuilders have known for eons, essentially, right? So that this mass gain phase and that sort of thing, that's something that really helps getting stronger. But then if you're also supposed to do ring muscle ups, it becomes sort of detrimental. So
that's why it's interesting.
That is why it's so intriguing. You got to dial it in, and you got to find the sweet spot where. And I know a lot of athletes have said this in the past, and Rich Froning has like a similar quote where you want to find this balance where you're strong enough to be competitive, while still maintaining a VO2 max that enables you to have the engine required to succeed at the games or now the semifinals. But you also don't want your VO2 max to become so high that it starts to diminish your muscle mass and your strength. So it is definitely a little more tricky or a little trickier to dial in those aspects in your season preparation than it might be in other sports where you focus on just this one thing. And then again, also to not disrespect anybody, of course, being at the absolute epitome of that one sport is still a super cool and amazing achievement. But just for me, as a scientist, I like to see the different aspects of physiology and of performance, and that is something that CrossFit provides, whereas a lot of other sports are a little more one-dimensional in that sense.
Yeah, you just mentioned Rich Froning, who's the top of the top of the top of the top.
Who's the GOAT?
Who's the GOAT? And but CrossFit is like a sport where 99.999% are just doing it for the sake of movement.
Yes.
And I think if someone like that measures his VO2 max or the glucose monitor, we had it in the lecture, it doesn't really tip the scale, right?
Yeah. Certainly not.
So when we go back to the nutrition topic and to the carbs, what would you say can everyone implement maybe in their diet or change probably his behavior or her behavior in order to make an impact?
If I had to single out one thing to keep it really, really easy, and we actually have a couple of posts that also try to break it down to this very basic level that is still applicable to, like you said, 99% of the people. I would say, for me, and Gommaar can comment on that and change my mind in a second, but I say try to eat around training if you exercise. So first of all, exercise and try and do that at least 3 times per week. If you can, a little more often. Try to do resistance exercise, heavy resistance exercise, as well as endurance training, if you can. Again, I know time doesn't always permit for everybody. And then try to eat your carbs and your protein in some proximity of training. It's not super important for your adaptations if you don't try to compete on a certain level or so. But it will still help to redistribute this energy and those nutrients that you take in to shuttle them towards muscle, to shuttle them towards where they aid you in your performance and in your functionality, also in daily life, rather than being something that is just deposited in your adipose tissue or even your liver or so. So I would say exercise, eat around your exercise windows if you can, and then try and get your veggies in. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. Maybe I'm gonna say something controversial here. That it's simply a matter of your question, like dictates or says, you should. What do you do for nutrition, right? In my opinion, not so much. You just have to focus on your training. I'm not joking. Like that is by far the most important thing for overall health, for just exercise, movement as well, and getting better in CrossFit. I'm not saying this just because of opinion. I mean, there's studies showing that if 2 groups were reduced in steps to 4,000 steps maximal a day, so they were very sedentary people, right? And they all overate. They had to overeat, so I think 250 calories too much per day, both groups, right? But one group did 1 hour exercise, right? And the energy they expended during the exercise, they gave even more to that group of people.
So they had to eat more because they also exercised.
Yes, exactly. So both groups ate around 250 calories too much, right? One group, after 10 weeks, got fat or kind of like they had some body fat on top. Their blood parameters went down the drain and so on, like what you would expect. Of course, the exercise group, 1 hour of exercise a day, I think 5 times a week, completely kept it to baseline. All the blood parameters looked completely healthy. Free fatty acids, cholesterol, and so forth were all fine. So I think if you're a general normal person, I would not try to focus too much on certain aspects of nutrition, timing, how much carbs, for 30% carbs, 70% carbs. I would rather try to focus on movement efficiency, getting better at gymnastics, show up, consistency in the gym. That's my opinion a little bit, but I think it's an easier, it's an easier way for people to adhere to exercise than if a gym owner saying, hey man, don't eat too many carbs or don't eat too many proteins. People get confused. Show up in the gym and do the exercise.
And that's an interesting point. I mean, there's always this debate, what's more important, is it nutrition or is it exercise? And then there is this old quote where it says,
you can't outrun
a bad diet, which is to a certain extent, it really depends on the scenario. But there's also this quote where it says, exercise is king, nutrition is queen, and together they provide a kingdom.
That's a better quote. That's a more accurate quote.
I think that is what it is. I think if you had to prioritize, I would also prioritize vigorous exercise on a regular basis over nutritional details, for sure. A lot of people don't really bring that commitment, unfortunately, to exercise to the table. And I think that is something where coaches can definitely have an impact and help, because that is what you should be striving for, that the people, like Gommaar said, show up, and then everything else becomes sort of more secondary,
Yeah. If we do a post with WOD Science about nutrition, it always gets more likes than any detailed exercise post. It's interesting. I always find it interesting. So
because
people are interested still in it.
People are interested, and I think people look for the easy fix and the magic pill or the magic recommendations.
You don't find it at WOD Science.
You don't find it with us. There's really just too much detail and too much
focus on detail.
Too much focus on detail, because if you exercise vigorously, and we all know these people, right, who are lifelong exercisers, and they pretty much eat what they want, and they still have a decent body, and people are shocked or even upset about the fact that they can eat what they want. But if you are a lifelong exerciser, and there is really good data on that offsets a lot of the detrimental effects of, say, suboptimal nutrition. So if people are really keen on that, again, there's a couple of things that you can definitely optimize with your nutrition. No question, it'll help you. But the question is, should you prioritize minute details that will aid your performance when you're not even trying to improve performance because you're not a competitor, right? So maybe start with the basics first, show up in the gym, and then worry about the rest later.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because I don't know what you think about that, but when people join my gym, in the beginning, they're very focused on getting the training in. And after a certain amount of time, they really start asking questions about nutrition. Okay. So one thing, the exercise, if it's working and if they see results, they want to know more about nutrition. How can I look even better? How can I feel even better?
Yeah.
And I think that's very important, because you can have the best diet and you're not active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe you just need to twist it, like you said. Just get the workout in 5 days a week or 3 days a week when you start. And the nutrition thing, it will eventually figure out itself.
Yeah.
Catch on. And we had an interesting post on that recently, actually, where we looked at data that tried to answer the question, is it better to be skinny but unfit, or is it better to be a little bit chubby, so to say, but in decent fitness shape, so to say? And the data suggests that it's actually better to be a bit fitter, but also a bit fatter, than to be skinny but unfit. So I think that's also another important takeaway, maybe for the audience, that don't worry about certain details too much. And like you said, maybe it catches on later, and you're still able to optimize these things once you reach the next level.
CrossFit gyms do not have mirrors, right?
Exactly. Very rarely.
But everyone asks, where are the mirrors, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I need to check my squat. Where are the mirrors?
Yeah, exactly.
The coach will tell you when you do a no rep. No worry about that.
No, that's so funny. Actually, I have the same thing, which I always tell to someone, because I have a little bit of injury problems with my back and my knees, and everything hurts. And I always say, I would take 10 kilos of your body fat and I give you my pain,
Yeah,
and
of
I would
course.
trade it like 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Because I don't really care if I have like 10 kilos of fat with me, because I'm fit, because I feel good. And that's probably something which the whole modern diet industry is like giving a fake or a bad picture, especially with Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
You see so many, people
Over
who
the top.
look really skinny, who look really fit, but in the end, maybe they're completely burned out, they're overtrained, they don't feel good. And that's what you don't see.
It's that's why we always talk about this. We also want to move a little bit the platform, not saying away from Instagram, because we want to stay for sure on Instagram, but also, let's say, expand the platform, for example, to video content, to YouTube, because you can dive a little bit deeper into certain topics. Because we always say this, like, if you have a very superficial post with whatever, a CrossFit athlete about their diet, whatever post, it's not even that science-based, it gets 5,000 likes on Instagram, because it's very visually, as you say.
Easy to digest, quick.
But I think on other social media platforms, mostly video content, people actually dig into some of the details, and more longer form content. I'm just talking whatever, Joe Rogan podcast is 4 hours, right? So no one thought that would ever work, these things. But that's why it's important, I think, to ride the wave of time, and to also find other platforms. And Instagram, I think, it's not doing the best job to just brainwash people sometimes. And I think we have to take care of this also with younger kids, for sure. I have two almost 3 small kids. I'm worried about this, honestly. Like, I'm really worried about this.
And I mean, we have commented on that in the past as well, where there was a study that came out that showed that social media platforms like Instagram or Facebook have, so to say, toxic psychological effects, especially on teenagers. And I think that's an important topic, and not to shoot ourselves in our own foot here or so, but Instagram per se is not necessarily a really good medium designed to provide scientific detail, right? And that's where we're trying to come in, and we still try to provide some digestible details on evidence-based information. At the same time, we always see it when our posts are 7, 8, 9 slides long. People don't really read the last couple of slides. And then in the comments, you can see a mirror of that, where people only read like the first 1 or 2. And then, you get this interaction between people like, oh, why didn't you look at this or that? And then
I did on slide number 7.
Exactly. And then it's like, oh, actually, we did.
But this could also be maybe a strength of our platform, because people, as I said, they are hungry for this still, at least a niche of people, right?
Yeah.
So maybe even when it's on Instagram and not tailored for this, it still is maybe a good idea, because otherwise people just get fed only superficial stuff, and maybe WOD Science can help this a bit.
Yeah, so just from my own opinion, I feel like that your content is very, very important in this big world of fake news and like completely... I don't find the right words to describe that, actually.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's very sad. Yeah, just keep it that way. And it's very important, not only because it's scientifically backed, but also because the importance of the knowledge you bring to the people. Yeah. Because in the end, it's not super difficult to be fit and to have like a good nutrition when you keep it very simple.
Yeah, I agree.
And you're explaining it in a way that the people understand it. They don't get confused with all the stuff, what's posted out there on Instagram. You have to take this supplement, you have to do this and that and the other thing. So thank you for keeping it simple and scientifically. And I can't wait to see what's the future is holding up for us.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate it. And it's like you said, it's definitely not rocket science, and that's something that we also always try to point out with most of our posts. Really, the goal is to put things into perspective rather than to perpetuate certain myths or certain stories, so to say. But I mean, that's also part of human nature. I'm afraid that people always look for a certain story or some magical bullet or something like that, and sometimes it's important to remind them that the magic pill is showing up.
Yeah, it is showing up, actually.
Yeah, thanks guys, and
thank you for the interview.
Thank you very much. Our pleasure.
Hope to talk soon.
If you like this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify. See you next time.